Hello, everyone. We are now live on Facebook, and we're going to start this discussion off now with my esteemed panelists. I'm so honored and delighted to be in conversation with these gentlemen for many reasons. Um, they are tremendous contributors to the world I believe we all deserve, as well as their visionary, their revolutionary, their solutionary, have a great respect for historic history and historical analysis, and have done a tremendous amount to influence and nurture my critical thinking as well as the critical thinking of many, many, many people across the world. And so you will see an opportunity to post your questions in the Q&A. We've disabled the chat just for protection, but you can post your questions in the Q&A, and on Facebook Live, feel free to have a dialogue with one another. But I will try at the end, towards the end, to look at Facebook Live comments and see if we can interject that into the dialogue as well. And so, without further ado, I would like to get started with my son, and this will be the only time that I gush about him being my son and make that a whole part of this panel experience. But I wanted to invite Tyree Petty Williams to this discussion for many reasons. Number one, he's probably my greatest educator, of all people that I've learned from, and my critical thinking has been drastically heightened by the fact that I had some hand in raising someone who didn't allow me to just because him. And by that I mean there was no say as I do as I say, not as I do with critical thinking future attorney debate champion. so um, in addition to that, Tyree graduated from Howard University. His graduation was the on the 150th anniversary of Howard University, and Chadwick Boseman was his keynote commencement speaker. And ironically, at that same time, Tyree actually gave um, I'm not sure if it's called the commencement,
The invocation.
the invocation speech for his graduating class. And so all of this commenced Mother's Day weekend, and it had a tremendous impact on me in witnessing the legacy and the type of go forward message that Dr. Boseman, who he was given his honorary doctorate degree from Howard on that day as well, was giving to the young people, that really aligned with my ideology and thinking. He was telling them not to be so focused on a job and to be thinking about meaningful work, which is something that in my organizing capacity, that's a lot of the messaging that I try to put across too. And so, without further ado, I'd like to have Tyree tell you about himself, um, how he came into what he's doing currently now, that impact that Chadwick Boseman has had on him, and then how he sees the work that he's doing is connected or diverging from Chadwick's legacy. Go ahead, Tyree.
Sure. Thank you for the introduction. Like my mom said, I graduated from Howard University in 2018. From there, I went to the University of Chicago Law School, where I am now. I'll be entering my third year there, my third and final year, on the 21st of September, actually. So it's gone by pretty quickly. But as it relates to Chadwick Boseman, what I think was most impactful about him to me was that he saw beyond the imminent, and that's something that uh, was reflected in his commencement speech. You know, when we were sitting out on Howard's Yard in 2018, we've been out there for 5 hours in 90-degree weather, sweltering, and everyone was really exhausted. You know, because Howard, being the enormous Black family that it is, we gave honor to the current graduate, but we also gave honor to the people who graduated in the 60s and the 70s. And we had representatives from every decade come up and, you know, speak and give their piece as they should have. but it took so much time, and the commencement rounded it all off. But by the time we heard Chadwick, we were exhausted, and we were hot, and I was 3 shades more brown than I was before I got out there. So by the time he spoke, his message was extraordinarily powerful, but it was a lecture. He was teaching us, in a moment where I think everyone was expecting a really celebratory, you made it type of speech. He gave us a reckoning on all of our different paths and all of our different journeys. He spoke to the students who may not have had the grades that they wanted. He spoke to the students who may not have been graduating with the job that they wanted, or the students who may not have ended up in the career path that they thought they would when they entered Howard. And he wanted us all to recognize that our journeys and our paths were different. But beyond that, he acknowledged that Howard University had been embroiled in protests that very year, where students had occupied the administration building, where we actually struggled against the administration for 8 to 9 days, fighting for change in financial aid and for admissions and in the curriculum in a number of different ways, where the students thought that, even the students who were seniors, who were on their way out, thought that what we needed was to make sure that Howard University would be better for the students who came behind us. And he rounded that up by saying that we all loved Howard enough to struggle with it. And that was the message that I think resonates with me the most, a recognition that fighting against an institution that you're under and one that's supposed to serve you doesn't mean you don't love it. And how I recognize that he spoke to not only that present moment, but to today was, after he passed, I think like we all did, I re-listened to that commencement speech. It's actually on Spotify. And I thought about the current political framing of protest in America and how there's this understanding being created by 45 that those who fight against this country for its wrongs, or those who try to improve it, are people who are unpatriotic or who don't love it or who don't want to see it be the best that it is. And he was wrong. And I think that Chadwick Boseman spoke to that not only in the Howard University capacity, but also to the capacity of someone being an American in this country. And that's something that I really took away from it, that the protests, the struggles, even the most contentious of them are out of love for not only what it is we want this country to be, but everyone who's going to come behind us, even if we're on our way out. And that's what he did for us. That's what that moment was for us. He fought for us, even though he knew he was on his way out. And I really appreciated that. And, that's one thing that I'm never going to forget.
Wow. Thank you for that, Tyree. I want to actually go from you to Will C for a number of reasons. And then we're going to come back to have deeper questions and dialogue. But Will C was one of your youth mentors. I remember I remember walking into East Michigan Environmental Action Council. I was trying to figure out how to get you into movement work, and Young Educators Alliance was doing like some powerful stuff out in these streets, environmental justice, tackling environmental racism and things like that. And Will, welcomed you in with open arms himself, Sawatu, Salamara, and the rest of the crew there. And I've just been in awe of the ways that Will has evolved within his own organizing, not only for himself and how he needs to move through the world and take care of himself, but just for the moment, the historical moment, like the vision of the moment. Like he was saying, take the houses back when people was thinking that was just a crazy idea. And so, Will, I would love for you to talk more about, number one, your trajectory, the current work that you're doing as not only an entertainment justice organizer, but a disability rights organizer, and how you see that connected to Chadwick Boseman's legacy, or where they diverge at all.
Ashe. Ajuba Olarun, Ajuba Olafin, Ajuba Oladumare. I give praise, give thanks to the creator of this world, to the creator of all the dimensions that we can't see, to the creator of everything that's possible. I'd like to start with just a little piece, just a little bit of a flow. And it starts like this. My body is a temple, it's a day-to-day struggle, physical and mental, the day-to-day struggle, energy, lyrically, move a muscle hustle, spiritually feeling me, the day-to-day struggle. I know what it's like to wake up, throwing up, hurling out your guts in a pink plastic tub, in and out of consciousness, drastic as fuck. Pee-wee on the bench press, I ain't holding up, etc., etc. Day-to-day struggle. I really love and I really appreciate being invited to be on this panel, being invited to this event, because there are certain figures, there are certain Africans, especially when they pass, you just go deeper into them. You know what I'm saying? Not just the outpouring of love, but for me as a cultural organizer, you know, it was like, the last one I can remember before this was Sean Price, you know what I'm saying? You just kind of, they pass and it's like, okay, but then your relationship just goes deeper and deeper. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to go deeper and deeper into the life of this amazing African. And what I found, you know, through the articles and through other people's testimony is that Chadwick Boseman was a student and a practitioner of African culture. You know what I'm saying? They were talking about when he was at Howard University, he was working at the Black bookstores. He was in the Black arts movement. He was in the Black theater movements. You know what I'm saying? And they said he'd be working in the Black bookstore, always be having different books, you know, always be different reading. And from what I understand, he was not just a Hollywood actor, but he was looking at how could he advance African culture? How could he advance this Black culture that we have? And how is his life gonna advance this culture? And so it was beautiful to see. And I think that's kind of why I started out with this piece, that excerpt of Day-to-Day Struggle from my album, From the Basics, you know what I'm saying? In terms of many people, and I think he was one, know that our culture has been a medicine. Our culture has been a glue. You know, our culture has saved our lives. Our culture has allowed people to grow. Our culture has done a lot of magical things. And he was, to my understanding, throughout his life, just trying to struggle and strive and figure out how to do that to the best of his ability, you know? Yeah. And for the last 4 years of his life, he also was an African with a chronic illness. You know what I'm saying? That news came out, you know, his cancer, his diagnosis, but then it also came out, you know, he made numerous movies. I didn't go and list the whole discography, but even while he had cancer, he made numerous movies, you know? And so I think that ties into the African identity, because as an organizer from Detroit, who's not a celebrity, I found that sometimes it's familiarity with suffering that helps us to form those bonds. You know what I'm saying? Like, you be in Detroit and you talk about what you going through, you know what I'm saying? And other people are like, okay, that's some real shit. You know what I'm saying? I feel you. I feel you. You know what I'm saying? I feel it's not just some nice ideas that you're saying. You know what I'm saying? And so he has not only the struggle of Blackness, but he had the struggle of physical illness, but he chose not to share it. You know what I'm saying? And I've been reading discussions and they were talking about his brand and just this image of being this strong, dignified Black man, and not, could he get jobs and could he get acting jobs and all these different things that he had to negotiate. And so part of my work recently, I've been dealing with kidney failure since 1990. I'm a survivor of lymphoma cancer. You know what I'm saying? I put some of the things in some of my rhymes some of the time. But right now I also facilitate support groups for people with disabilities and chronic illnesses. And I know that for many reasons, a lot of Africans, a lot of Black folks don't talk about it. We might not identify with the word disabled. Disability has even been weaponized against us. You know what I'm saying? In schools, you know, they're like, oh, you retarded, you special education, you know what I'm saying? And so we don't have the same quote unquote disability pride in our community. And so to do these support groups, we just got to meet people where they at. Yo, what you going through? You got asthma, you got autoimmune disease, you got diabetes. Come on, let's build. You know what I'm saying? You got cancer. let's build, you know what I'm saying? And it's not about people feeling sorry for you. It's not about, oh, poor you. You know what I'm saying? You living your life. You know what I'm saying? That's why it's the day-to-day struggle, because some people is like, oh, poor black people. It must be so hard to be black. You know what I'm saying? No, man, it's the freshest thing on the planet. You know what I'm saying? Literally, you know what I'm saying?
That's
Oh,
right.
you got chronic illness, poor you. You know what I'm saying? But it's a certain wisdom. It's a certain navigation. And I think that part of the disability justice is like reframing, you know, the whole poor you, I'm a victim, I can't do nothing. And I think that as Africans, I'm gonna conclude right now, as black people, we've worked so hard to reframe it on being black. No, we much more than just a Negro. We much more even than a slave. You know what I'm saying? We was doing all sorts of magic as slaves. You know what I'm
That's
saying?
right.
I think that it's time to reframe that disability, that chronic illness. There's so much more, even death. You know what I'm saying? He's an ancestor now. Even death is glorious. You know what I'm saying? His power has increased tenfold, you know what I'm saying, since his passing. We wouldn't be talking about him right now. We wouldn't be intentionally taking his essence into our lives if he hadn't passed. So even death, you know what I'm saying, we ain't worried about death as Africans, you know what I'm saying? We ain't studying that, as my granny used to say. And so he opens a lot of powers to Portal, you know, through his study as a cultural organizer. And so I'm excited to be a part of this conversation.
Ooh, Ashe. Ashe. So many things from that, right? So first off, I mentioned how you have joined in the village to help educate my son growing up, but also myself, as someone who only in the last year got real honest about her own chronic illnesses, because of your support, and your nurturing and your check-ins and your, we holding this space in this circle, sister. I got you. Because there's also a fear, and if you're in any form of revolutionary work, which I consider Chadwick Boseman being part of, then you're at risk potentially, right? I know several ancestors over the last decade who communicated to me, towards the end of their life, the fear that they had of appearing vulnerable, knowing that they are out here, in forms of resistance. And so I think we'll never fully know, all the reasons why, Dr. Boseman kept it to the chest, but we can imagine, based on our historical analysis, our lived experience, and dealing with these violent systems, that there was probably a layered reason why those things were not put out there, for everyone to dissect, and analyze. And so I'm really grateful to have, like I said, been in that audience, at Howard University, and have had a great respect for Chadwick prior to him, transitioning. And I've organized several discussions called, Identities in the African Diaspora. And I organized several discussions on the Black Panther film, when it was out. And one of my models of that type of cultural organizing is, this next person that I want to introduce, Dr. Khalid el-Hakim. And he has been, I don't know, for as long as I can remember having some form of political consciousness, has been a model. And, and it was one of the reasons why I had the courage to, the very next day, say that I'm going to have this dialogue. Not waiting for people to give me permission to honor ancestors, not waiting for people to tell me that I had to be qualified, to talk about our history and our ancestral lineage and legacy and our cultural contributions to this society. But I've watched and witnessed, just the power and impact that the Black History 101 Mobile Museum has had. We have been honored to host, the museum at the Petty Propolis, Artist Festival and Artist Retreat in historic Idlewild. And without, further gushing, I'm just going to to open it up for Dr. Khalid and have you tell us about yourself, your work, where how you see Dr. Boseman's legacy, how it connects with yours, if it diverges at all. You're on mute.
Peace, family. I'm very honored to be here with you all today. I'm honored to be here with you, Tawana, Tyree, William, and Omari. Omari and Will, we go back some years. I met Omari as a student at Fair State University. William Copeland, we'll see. We met probably in 1994, 95 when I was a student at Fair State, and I was a part of a poetry collective called Third Stone from the Sun. And so I've been familiar with your work for many years and your activism, and you've been very, very consistent in your work. And yeah, so I'm just very honored to be here with you all today. With Boseman, which is amazing. And I've known his work, through his films, but it's interesting that in depth, when we go back and reflect and see the impact of him, how phenomenal his work is and his commitment, and to read about how people viewed him and the relationships he had is very interesting. But for me, one of the things that made me reflect is mentorship in his life. He didn't become who he was just on his own. And obviously one of his most important mentors was Felicia Rashad. And when I thought about the relationship that she had with him, I thought about some of the mentorship experiences I had, especially with Black women. So I have to shout out a couple of Black women in my life early on in my high school experience who kind of gave me a knowledge of self, affirmed some things for me as a Black man, and as a young Black man in high school. One is Sister Shoshana Shakur, which many of us may know. She was my high school English teacher who gave me information as a high schooler that I might not have gotten back then, but just simply by planting seeds, those things sprouted out in my adulthood for sure. And then Sister Canubia, who was my counselor at Bumford, who is just, she just gave me so much information on Africa, Egypt. Egypt is in Africa, but just she was an Egyptologist and studied classical African civilizations, and just the information she's given me over the years. And I just reconnected with her recently, and some of the things that she told me recently just blew my mind, because things come full circle. But besides mentorship, there's been comparisons between Chadwick and people like Paul Robeson and Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte. And when you think about Chadwick, he wasn't just an actor. He was a writer. He was a playwright. He played sports in college like Paul Robeson did. Just having those knowing that he comes from that tradition of greats like that, so you get a sense that at Howard, which houses Paul Robeson's collection, that at some point, if he physically didn't go in there and experience the Paul Robeson collection, that just by the spirit of being on that campus and what that represents, that had some type of impact on him. Sidney Poitier, wow, there's been a lot of comparisons, and I read one quote where he acknowledged that comparison, but he also took it deeper, and this kind of shows you what type of person of integrity and consciousness of Chadwick was. And he mentioned that, for many years in Hollywood, they would only let someone be just Sidney Poitier or hold that space. And he challenged Hollywood to say, well, there's a whole bunch of other great actors here that are doing the work, and we have to open up Hollywood to opportunities for not just the next Sidney Poitier or any woman who would be able to do this type of work. He also, in the past 4 years of his life, he made 10 films. It was 10 films in the past 4 years of his life. And not only 10 films that he acted in, but he also co-produced and was a producer of 3 of those films. So he did amazing, amazing work. And he was also purpose-driven and very intentional with the acting jobs that he took. 42, Jackie Robinson, Marshall, Thurgood Marshall's story, James Brown's story, and then Black Panther. Phenomenal work. And again, he picked and chose the work that he did. You know, he chose to be a part of the Gods of Egypt, knowing that they were misrepresenting the Gods of Egypt, but he took on the role to make sure that they had at least one representation of a Black God of Egypt, right? So just so many things. And the way I see his work tying into the being able that might be unknown. And towards the end of this talk today, I hope to share a very interesting connection between Chad Boseman and some other important figures in American history. But I'll leave. I'm honored and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much for that. What did I tell y'all? I told y'all was about to get a wealth of history and knowledge, and that's why I have the most of the greatest admiration for the impact that Dr. Khalid el-Hakim brings to this world, essentially, because it's a global Black History 101 Museum is a global educator on the African diaspora. And so this last brother that I want to introduce, how do you go about describing who I still call Omari King Wise, Omari Barksdale? I remember entering into the poetry scene, and O was one of those people that you wanted to respect your work, just flat out. If you were creating, if you were putting some art into the world, especially if you was talking about Black folk, you really wanted that seal of approval. And one thing I will say, in thinking about bringing Omari onto this panel, was I see a similar type of integrity around like the creativity that we put into the world when I think of Omari. And I think about like all the times that I've sat in his living room and been critiqued, sometime bruising my ego and being critiqued about my work, and being challenged to dig deeper, and being challenged to move beyond performance. And that has had a tremendous impact on how I move about and what I create and what I put into the world, and not seeing myself so much as a performer, but seeing myself as someone who uses their art to re-spirit, or to educate, or to politicize. And so in addition to that, you know, I know Omari has faced his own challenges with navigating the world with a disability, waking up with a very frightening circumstance, you know, not too long ago, and having to readjust to, you know, how you go from, you know, this big towering figure that many people fear and respect to thinking more vulnerably about how you can still be that towering figure, but also tap into some vulnerabilities that exist when, you know, when your health is challenged. And so I would love to hear more from Omari about, number one, your work, your legacy of contributions, and how you see a connection or divergence from Dr. Boseman's work. And I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead. Go ahead. It's you have to do it. I'm sorry.
So A lot to say. Fortunately, Will, Tyree, and Khalid and yourself have covered so much of the ground of what I would like to say. So I won't belabor too much of the points they've made already. First off, I want to say to Will, I see what you did there. I see what you did, right? So the nod to Notorious Big, Everyday Struggle. I heard it in the lyrics. I heard the nod in the title. And I think about the history of when losing Black celebrities started to impact me. And I think about Trouble T. Roy from Heavy D and the Boys. I think about the first major impact, which was Notorious Big and Pac, right? And so bringing Notorious Big back into this conversation connected to Chadwick, I think sometimes we feel shame about feeling so closely connected to so-called celebrities, right? Because we're not supposed to be attached to them. We're supposed to be in this real world, this real life. And those are folks that, we don't ever come in real contact with, or so I think there's this thing where people try to guilt one another into feeling shame about feeling connections to people they never actually physically met. So I wanted to acknowledge that to anybody that's watching and listening. Please know that there's no shame in feeling those connections. We're all connected, especially if we all go and put our feet in the soil barefoot. We're connected to everything on earth, the animals, the plants, everything. So I don't want anybody to feel shame. So I'll briefly talk about some of the work I'm doing and get more into Chadwick Boseman to make any connections that I can find. So I do a few different things. One is I do patriarchy deconstruction work, healthy masculinity work. And I do that with Sasha Center, with Kalima Johnson and the amazing crew at Sasha Center. I do it independently around the country with organizations for their team, their staff, especially for the men on their teams. I do it with Haven and Wayne County Safe, which are domestic violence service organizations, and with the Detroit Lions, right? And one of my great sources of pride is being one of the part of the Black History 101 Mobile Museum from the beginning of our travels, which is, Khalid can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're entering our 16th year right now. So, and we've had the same crew, Dumini DePorce, Professor Griff, Khalid, and myself from the beginning. So it's the four brothers. So all of the work I do, I always thought about the saying that if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life, right? And the moment I started doing all of the things I'm connected to, my passion, my love, that's when I stopped working, and that's when I started working for our Black space, our people, as opposed to just working for my bills, DTE and Sprint and rent. So, but when I think about, as you say, Dr. Boseman, as I think about our brother Chad, I think about somebody that looked like they were not working. And when I say, and I don't mean that to discredit the energy and effort and skill set that he developed, the energy and effort that he put into developing his craft, all of his crafts. But when I think about as an artist, to me, he reached the epitome of what he wanted to do. Sure, there may have been some roles he wanted to eventually play. There may be some movies he wanted to eventually write. But when you think about the ability to play three major historic Black figures, and then that were real life human beings that had major impact on the Black community and the community as a whole. When you think about the fact that this man got to play not the first Black superhero on TV or in the movies, because Wesley Snipes, and it may have been a movie before Wesley Snipes, like Meteor Man or something like that. But as far as an iconic comic book hero, Black Panther, if you think back to when Black Panther was released, us Black folk, we suddenly became one again, right? We dressed up like we were going to a ball in Wakanda and went to the damn movies. We dressed up in 5 outfits and went to see the movie 5 different times. We single-handedly, as one ethnic, one race, one group, we single-handedly captured a moment in time that is like no other when it comes to movie history. Chadwick was at the centerpiece of that. All we had to do was see him in that movie with Captain America, the Civil War movie, and he captured everybody. He was immediately Black Panther. And if you're a comic book buff, you was like, yo, that's T'Challa. You know, whatever T'Challa was in the comic book, this is T'Challa in real life, right? Like Wakanda became a real place for us to unite and gather, even if it's spiritually or emotionally or mentally. Wakanda forever became a model that we could all tattoo on our chest. And if somebody says it's not a real place, we could say, wow, you know, you're lying. It's real to us. Like Wakanda, we have made it what we want it to be. Wakanda is our Mali empire in our Ethiopia. Like Wakanda is our Kush and our original dynasties of Egypt. Wakanda was what we needed. And I think that movie and him playing that role in such a powerful way is what has continued to propel, as you have seen, seeds of our escalation and our evolution and our elevation over the last 3 years, even coming into what we see now as protests. Like, it has propelled us to this point. So some people say our protests are empowered by the pandemic. I say that might be partially true. But a large part of us protesting and being energized came from that moment in time when the Black Panther was released and we all started to come together. People were starting to read books again, you know, that were related to our struggle and our projections. And it reminded me of, as Khalid, Dr. Khalid on the line with us right now, and I always tell people when we travel with the museum, when we take the museum around, hip hop educated us. Hip hop told us who Malcolm X was and Marcus Garvey, even though nobody else had. Malcolm X was a voice, a name that we got out of hip hop. And everybody in our generation, it seemed like, started reading the Malcolm X autobiography of Malcolm X, right? We started to galvanize then, right? We started to elevate. So now we're in this new phase with an internet at our disposal. And we have this guy that comes along and tells us who Thurgood Marshall was, and tells us who Jackie Robinson was, and tells us who James Brown was, for those of us who didn't see them at their extreme peak because we weren't alive yet. So he got to give us those people again. He got to give us T'Challa, which, although is a fictional character, is very real to us in many ways. So I'll close with this. I feel that Chad and I are connected because we're both humanitarians. We love people. If you look at the things he's done, if you look at some of the visits he made, even when he was sick, we care about people. Maybe not at the expense of ourselves, but at the healing of ourselves. And I feel that connection to him, and I'll always take that. And I'll always thank him for being what he was, the power that he was, and the power that he is as an ancestor.
Woo. Ashe. Ashe. Thank you for that. Y'all have given us so much to process and think about. Um, and I really want to dig a little bit deeper into you all's, because this isn't, one of the things that I'm cognizant of. And even with organizing the dialogues that I talk about, the identities in the African diaspora discussions that I organize, as well as the film discussions around Black Panther, um, there, there were still these opportunities to show how vast um, our identities are within the African diaspora, and how we show up in spaces where there is unity and also challenge and contention. And I think one of the reasons for me that Dr. Boseman played these various characters in our history, to kind of heighten folks have their perceptions of like what they feel James Brown was, or what they feel Thurgood Marshall was, as part of the legal system, or what they felt Jackie Robinson was, and being in baseball, which is a white institution. And I think the care and caution that he took with portraying these ancestors in a way that saw their full humanity was important and significant. Because there are a lot of people who put out films and books and plays and and portray our ancestors and elders and romanticize them in a way that doesn't take into consideration the challenges that we face in being cultivated and surviving violence within a white supremacist society. And so I want to talk. I'm gonna pivot back to Tyree as an example. One of the pressures, one of the things that you and I talked a lot about as you were making decisions to go to university, right? And and Howard, making sure not to romanticize Howard University either. But one of the things that we came to consensus on was that we felt that you could get a greater sense of who you are by being in that institution, and then make a decision to go on to wherever you wanted to go from that point on. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how you felt being part of that lineage, that legacy of Howard, and then going on to a pretty conservative, predominantly white law school, where you had to face some serious challenges regarding racial identity as soon as you got there. I want to, you talked about how Dr. Boseman tied his legacy at Howard to your legacy at Howard, where you both struggled against the administration, right? And so I want you to carry us through being a part of that organizing and activism at Howard, and then going on to Chicago and having to apply what you had learned and cultivated at Howard University.
Yeah, for sure. So, when I was deciding what school to go to, I actually had a debate scholarship to Michigan State, if you remember. And it was either I was deciding whether to go to Michigan State or to go to Howard. And one of the things that I struggled with was that to maintain my financial aid at Michigan State, I would have had to debate all 4 years. And I was at this point where I'd done it in high school, and I just didn't know if I wanted to do that anymore. I was going into this period of exploration, leaving home, a 10-hour drive from home, going to be on my own for the first time. And I really wanted to figure out how I could situate myself in this world on my own. And I didn't think that A, staying in Michigan, so close to my family, love y'all, or B, being kind of pigeonholed into this academic curriculum, career, would have really given me the freedom to find out who I was. And that's, at the time, that was largely the lens through which I was viewing my choice, and I ultimately decided to go to Howard, because I wanted to have every avenue open to me. So that's what I did. When I got to Howard, I recognized that what I was choosing between at the time, wasn't just whether to debate or not, or whether to be near my family or to be out on my own or not. I was choosing between an institution that in a history that is far too recent, allowed Black students to exist and get their education, and one that was formulated for the betterment and development of Black students. And when I got to Howard, I recognized that that space not only helped me figure out who I was, but it helped me figure out, in the lens of the diaspora, all of the many different me's that could have existed. I had never met people from like directly from Jamaica who came here to go to Howard. People who were directly out of Nigeria who came directly to go to Howard, Trinidad and Tobago. I met people from all over this planet, who were Black. And I hadn't done that. I went to Cass Tech. I went to a 95% Black school, but everyone I knew was from Detroit. They were like me, in recognition that Blackness isn't a monolith. And though I knew that at the time, I didn't see that at the time. And I think that Howard really, I was kind of dropped into this pool, if you will. But with each molecule of that pool was so diverse and so different. It formulated this one large entity, but everything that, led to its creation was so different. And that was just a world that I hadn't, it really blew my mind. I saw myself differently by the time I got out of Howard, but I really saw Blackness in a completely different way by the time I got out of Howard. I hadn't had an introduction to Pan-Africanism or the diaspora in a really human way until I got there. But taking that into UChicago, really, it kind of floored me. My entire academic experience, save for maybe one or two elementary schools, I've been at Black institutions with Black students. I've been at 90+% Black schools. Whether they were charter schools or magnets like Cass Tech, my classmates were always Black. So I don't think I ever had the opportunity to really sit with and recognize the questions I wasn't forced to ask about my classmates, or the questions I wasn't forced to ask about most of my teachers, or about the lessons I was being taught, or about the discourse that was being had in class. When someone said something, especially as it related to Blackness or as it related to race generally, there was never what I think John O. Jackson referred to as this decardio racism, this racial paranoia, this idea that there's some understanding that maybe what I'm seeing on the surface isn't necessarily the conversation that's being had behind closed doors. And my education, I think, was good for it, and my comfort and my development coming up. But I think that UChicago, especially when I started taking classes that inevitably pertain to my existence in this country, very obviously criminal law, but also my courses on property or civil procedure, really helped me understand that through and through, from the top to the bottom, from the rooter to the tube, this country is formulated in ways that really keep a foot as best as it can on the Black identity, and that the legal system is a really ground up way that that's done. And when I got to Chicago, one of the first incidents that I had with that was a professor using the N-word in class. Professor Jeff Stone actually teaches a course on freedom of speech at the time, the First Amendment and freedom of speech. And in teaching this course, he was arguing through the fighting words doctrine, this doctrine that the government protects your right to say pretty much anything, except for those things that do nothing but incite panic or harm. So you have governmentally protected speech to say whatever, but you can't say things like fire in a public institution because you know that that's going to cause chaos and panic. His argument then being that the N-word is one of those words that should be fighting words. But through doing that, he found it appropriate to use the N-word in this class, this white man, with his not so diverse student of pupils, but I think 4 or so Black students in the course. He'd been doing that for 40 years. And I wasn't the president of the Black Law Students Association there at the time. I wouldn't be until the next year. But one thing that Balsa did was create a demonstration in the Green Lounge, the common area, to protest not only his action in saying that word, but also the anecdote that I won't share, but the anecdote that he used to do it. And in doing that, we actually ended up having an hour-long conversation with 200 of the 600 students at the school speculating. And one thing I didn't like was that it turned into a spectacle. But from this discourse, we were able to convince this professor to stop using that word in that class, because the harm that he was doing it overrode whatever benefit that he thought he was conveying on the white students. Because that's what he said. He said that I don't think that your classmates recognize the gravity of the N-word. So that's why I feel like I have to say it. And what I remember saying to him explicitly, Black students, Black people have been at the bottom of education in this country, and white students have been taught at the expense of Black students since the inception of this nation and before it. And what you're doing is a microcosm of that in its richest form. So whatever benefit that you think you're conveying on your white students by teaching them this mini race day, it's completely overshadowed by the harm and the trauma that you're invoking in the students. And one student, she said explicitly that when you say the N-word in class, you older white man, you remind all of us of the first time someone said that to us, or called us that, or dehumanized us in that way. And that's not a reminder that I came to this class for. That's not a reminder that I pay these thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars to be educated at this institution for. And for that reason alone, that should impact you. You should recognize that. And that was my first year at law school. The year before, immigrants had a struggle with the school because of an institution, because of an organization at the school, a student-led organization that had said a lot of racially insensitive things about immigrants in this country, and that reflected the language of 45. And we had students who had actually been admitted to UChicago write letters, not only to the immigrant institutions in Balsa, but also to the university and the law school, to say that your response to some of the racial actions at the school are the reason that I'm no longer going here. The school was my first choice. Now I'm going to Stanford. Now I'm going to Yale, because I recognize that I won't be welcome at this institution because my voice isn't being heard, and I'm not even there yet. So I think one thing that is important for me as it relates to Chadwick Boseman was, and this discourse has gone on for a while since his passing, but Wesley Morris wrote for the New York Times that Chadwick Boseman, he played dignity, and he made it interesting. His role, he played a lot of different roles in a lot of different movies, but the role that he came into, was dignity. That's who he was bringing to whatever film he went into. And that's, I think, what I carried from Howard University. And I think that's where he got it from. And that's what I carried to Chicago. This notion that like my integrity won't be compromised for the sake of whatever education, whatever white male education that whatever institution I'm going into is trying to convey on me. I could sit in class and listen to these highly esteemed professors by institutions that look like them, who gave awards to them, created by them, everyone sitting in a circle telling each other that we're all accomplished. I could sit and listen to them teach me about things that not only have nothing to do with me, but that were built on the backs of labor and pain and trauma from people who look like me. I could sit and listen through that pedagogy that was not created to actually educate me, in an institution where my presence is a statistic, one used to give awards for diversity created by other institutions that are also doing a terrible job. Or I could say something, and recognize that for students who are like me, who maybe don't have that same feeling of confidence to speak up, or to put their education on the line by putting their necks on the line, which is a very real contention, because I have 2 classmates who were expelled from UChicago just in my time there, one of them for protesting. and he was not Black. I think that for those students who don't put their academic career on the line to speak up, like, I recognize that, and that's not a compromise in your integrity. But I think that the lesson that I was taught by Howard and by Chadwick Boseman was that when, like, at your core, when you're sitting there and you feel like whoever you're being asked to be by the institution that you're in isn't who you are, or it doesn't respect people who are trying to come after you, or it doesn't respect the people who paved the way for you to be there in the first place, then you say something, or you do something, or you go to a different institution, or you change the narrative, or you interject in the discourse. You know, when you speaking up is considered rude or unacademic or unprofessional, you do it anyway. And that's how I've seen myself at UChicago, you know. So I took that role not only as an incendiary position, one to light things on fire, but also a position to help others or to use the resources given to me and appropriate those for the people who I do want to be able to come behind me, you know. So the first thing I did as boss of president was create a laptop scholarship for 10 high school students in Chicago who were going off to college or were beginning their senior years in high school. You know, also we gave 10 brand new laptops, laptop cases, and extended memory drives to these students without knowing that we were going to end up in a virtual world. You know, another level through which academic education, another level through which education has disadvantaged people of color. So I think most broadly, that's the legacy that I'm carrying with me through Chadwick Boseman. One where I'm not going to sit in any space and be who that space wants me to be if that doesn't accord with who I know I am and who I've been taught to be. And you know, I really hope that that resonated with all those other graduates on the yard that day. And you know, everyone who saw Black Panther or Thurgood Marshall or James Brown or 42.
Ooh, thank you. I told you I wasn't gonna gush over this being my son, but anyway, thank you. Yeah, Will. So I want to go into you directly following Tyree, because I'm thinking about as he just said, you know, Chadwick gave this message. I was sitting there, and I mean, I was screaming and crying. You would have thought he was my son. You would have thought Chadwick was my son. Um, I'm screaming and crying because, like, the power of what he was telling these young people who are graduating from Howard University, to tell them not to get so focused on the institutions or the job, right? To think about meaningful work, like to make that distinction, and to challenge. You know, he knew that he was going to transition to an ancestor, and he refused work. He refused jobs. When a lot of people, you know, if you're thinking about, I only have this limited amount of time, I'm going to do as much, right? But he was so strategic and particular about what he involved himself in, even knowing that his time was limited here. And so I think about the dialogues that we have often, Will, about your decision to reframe and reshape what your contributions to the movement are going to be. And so I want to hear a little bit more about your thinking and your connection as you've been digging into Chadwick's legacy, but also your own deep dive that I know that you've been going through for several years now, as you've moved into a justice framework of entertainment, not looking at it as, you know, quote unquote performance, or, you know, how we're saying beyond acting for Chadwick, but like literal entertainment justice, literal disability justice, and that framework of work, and how you're being intentional about the legacy you want to leave in the world. And so I love to hear that from your own words.
Man, thank you so much. It's super dope, super amazing to hear everybody. It's super amazing to think about, you know, even with Tyree, the youngest person here, You know what I'm saying? We still got we're coming on 10 years, you know what I'm saying? And other folks, you know what I'm saying, as was mentioned, we coming on 15, if not closer to 20 years, you know what I'm saying, of knowing each other, of sometimes collaborating, often supporting each other, often working individually. So I'm that's a beautiful part of the story. And kind of like Tyree said on the other end, that's kind of like the story below the story. You know what I'm saying? He was talking about the white story below the story, or the institutional story below the story. And here we're talking about like the Detroit and the cultural story below the story. And so it's beautiful to feel that. And for all the younger organizers listening, you know, just to know that like this thing evolves over time, you know what I'm saying? It's beautiful, all the things that you're doing now, but there's like this richness, you know, when you've had that respect for each other over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And so, you know, and it evolves, man. You get older, you know, I made some shifts. My son, you might have seen him, he walked around different things. You know, I made some shifts having a son, you know what I'm saying? That was some of the first shifts that I made, was just like one of the biggest shifts I left. That's why I left youth organizing, was just having a son, and he was a baby. And I just, we're, you know, YEA, Young Educators Alliance, shout out to Sawatu, which Tyree was a member of. I just couldn't give, you know, like with youth, with teenagers, you got to be there. It ain't a 9 to 5 thing. You got to, you know, flow with them. You got to roll with them. You know what I'm saying? And I needed to flow and roll with my own kid. You know what I'm saying? And Omari is doing a lot of this anti-patriarchy, post-patriarchy, challenging patriarchy. And for a lot of men, I would just say, you know, that's one of the biggest opportunities we have for growth. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of contestants, babies' mamas, babies' fathers, you know what I'm saying? But to let your child transform you, you know, to let your child, regardless of your romantic, whatever, I'm divorced, we don't even need to go into all that, you know what I'm saying? But let your child transform you. Like, let your child take you to a new place. You know, Tawana kind of alluded to it, you know, saying that Tyree is one of the greatest teachers, you know, and so we're on that journey. And so part of the transformation has been, you know what I'm saying? Like I was telling Tyree, I don't know if you remember this, Tyree, but I told y'all in YEA, I was like, I'm gonna be to you what I expect you to be to my son. You know what I'm saying? He's in elementary school right now. You know what I'm saying? So I told those teenagers then, I don't even know if they knew what the heck I was talking about, but you will, you know what I'm saying? You will, when you get to that age, and when he gets to that age, y'all will be ready. And I just know, you know what I'm saying? I'm not even gonna have to do everything, because I know that, you know what I'm saying? Shout out to Kaz, my man Kaz from the hip hop world, is a big mentor to my son. Shout out to Knox. Shout out to all the ones who, you know, are continuing that village. You know what I'm saying? And so another thing, just the last thing that I'm gonna talk about is in 2017, I was having heart issues, was very fatigued, all these things. And I left organizing in a certain kind of way. And I was like, I'm retired from activism. And I was like, I ain't going to no meetings. And Tawana knows I'm a pretty calm person. The one time I can remember in my life I cussed somebody out was they asked me to speak at this event. And they were doing all this prep stuff for this event. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna go to the first meeting. I'm gonna speak at the event, but I ain't going to all the planning meetings. So I went to the first meeting, and then they just kept being like, Will, we need you at these meetings. We need you please come to the next. You know what I'm saying? Here I am, I got heart problems. You know what I'm saying? I got kidney problems. I ain't going to no meeting. I went to one meeting. I said I was gonna, you know what I'm saying? Please come to this next meeting. Every time they're having a meeting, they're asking me to come to these meetings. I just kind of fucking lost it and shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, God damn it, motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? I said I'm coming to the event. I came to one meeting. I said I ain't going to no meetings. You know what I'm saying? But I just say all that shit to say, like, disability justice teaches us like, yo, it's okay to take the pace that you need. You know what I'm saying? I think that as Africans, through slavery, through factory work, we get conditioned that I remember it as a kid, man, my fucking mom died when I was in high school. You know what I'm saying? And the lesson I learned from that was like a few days later, you back in school, you got to keep it moving. You know what I'm saying? Like I learned how to keep it moving. I kept it moving for 30 something years of my life. You know what I'm saying? I know how to keep it moving. You know what I'm saying? That was the lesson I learned as a kid. You know what I'm saying? My mom died when I was 16. You know what I mean? And I kept it moving, motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? But disability justice is like, maybe we don't have to keep it moving. Like maybe we could take time for ourselves. Maybe we could change the flow of it. Maybe we could, you know what I'm saying, work for ourselves and not get in the rat race. Maybe we could not do everything, you know, not go to all the meetings, not run around and, you know, attempt to do everything and tell people, you know what I'm saying? Like tell people like, no, I can't do this, or tell people, you know what I'm saying? And it's interesting because I read this article and this other actor, he started off being critical. He was on the set of The Five Bloods. I really like that movie. These Vietnam vets go back to Vietnam. It reminded me, I'm not that old, but it reminded me of like the enduring bonds. You know what I'm saying? Like these cats had this deep experience and then they came back. You know what I'm saying? It's like brotherhood over time, you know, but he was on the set of the meeting and Chadwick Boseman was getting massages and, you know, having people hold his hand and doing these different things. And he was like, oh man, this nigga gone, you know, he thinks he's this and that. This went to his head, you know what I'm saying? And then he realized later, only after Chadwick Boseman passed, you know what I'm saying? But I'm just saying you know, that in layman's terms, that would be called self-care, you know what I'm saying? But sometimes we have that what you doing? You know what I'm saying? That's privilege. What, you know, why are you doing that? You know, like our people's initial reaction can be against those type of things and you can have conflict. How come you ain't coming to, again, like in my example, how come you ain't coming to the meeting? How come you ain't doing all this stuff? You know, you think you better than us? Booty, booty, boo, you know? And so I think that part of the struggle of disability justice is like, yo, it's okay, man. You got a headache. It's okay not, you know what I'm saying? It's okay to cancel. It's okay to move your shit around. You know what I'm saying? Your shit is killing you and shit and you know what I'm saying? It's okay. You know, take care of yourself. It's okay. You know, figure it out. See if somebody can help you. You know what I'm saying? It's okay. And so that's been part of my journey, man. I had to learn to ask for help, man. You know what I'm saying? That's part of my 40. The other thing I want to say, and then I'm gonna shut up. You know what I'm saying? I was talking to my sister yesterday. I was telling her I was gonna do this panel. And she was like, yo, I'm just appreciative that you're alive. You know, she was like, given the stuff that you've been through. I was like, word. And I was looking it up. I was meditating. Chadwick Boseman graduated in the class of 2000. I graduated in the class of 99. You know what I'm saying? Like, he was like, I just thought of like, he's the cats that was either my year or 1 year older or what, you know, he like, we in the same cadre, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think about the people I went to school with. I was mad close with the cats who were 1 year older than me. I was mad close in college with the cats that were 1 year younger than me. You know what I'm saying? And I even know a few people from Howard who went to Howard, and then it's like, I wonder if they knew him. You know what I'm saying? Like, even Kobe, I got to shout out Kobe Bryant. You know what I'm saying? Team Virgo, August 23rd. He's literally 7 days older than me. You know what I'm saying? August 23rd, 1978, you know, it's his birthday, Team Virgo. Shout out Detroit Virgos.
Team Virgo.
Team Virgo. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, for me, there's also this layer, like these are our peers, like peers, you know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, okay, these is, you know what I'm saying? It was just a deeper thing, like, oh, like literally we on this vibrate, like these is the cats that I know that's in my immediate cipher because they just my age or they just 1 year older. You know what I'm saying? Like, so, okay, if I've been to Howard a few times when I was at college, you know what I'm saying? Maybe he was there type of thing. You know what I'm saying? Like we was in the same phases of life, even though we made different choices. And so I think that this is just a good time to reflect and a good time to I would say lastly, you know, we're taking it beyond self-care to community care. And I think that people talk about Chadwick. I like how you said he held it close to the vest, but it's not that he didn't tell anybody. And I really want to say this to anybody that has, you know, that has health conditions or that's going through things. He told his close people. He ain't tell you, but he didn't tell nobody. It's not that he didn't tell nobody. He told his close people. So you might be mad that you didn't know, but it's not that he suffered in silence and nobody knew and he kept it to himself and then he just died. You know what I'm saying? Like he was, because Michael B. Jordan knew, who played Killmonger, like a few, you know, his wife, he told some people. And so I just want to say that, you know, to anybody who is figuring out these type of things in their own life and be like, oh, Chadwick Boseman kept it secret, I'm gonna keep it secret. No, he ain't keep it secret. You know, he ain't tell you. You know what I'm saying? But he had a circle and he opened up to his circle. And so I just want to explicitly say that to people. You don't got to tell everybody, but it's good to tell somebody. You know what I'm saying? And so I just want to kind of close with that.
Ashe, I'm glad that you said that, because remember I referenced there were some elders who talked to me, you know, who told me about their fears of, you know, there being public knowledge beyond their core circle of folks knowing about, you know, what they were struggling and dealing with. And it runs the gamut of like, who's going to care for you, who's going to nurture you, who's going to see you as your best, most healthiest self. And then also, you know, these systems, you know, are violent and targeting, and then the acting world is non-forgiving, and so there's just so many layers to why we minimize our circles for our most precious moments, right? And he, you know, he's a very he's not the Dr. Boseman is not the norm as someone who's quote unquote a celebrity in a social media age who not only was able to keep his marriage close to the vest, but also the struggles, and so thereby protecting himself and his family, his extended family. And so you know, I talk a lot and I put so much out there, but I've even noticed how much I don't put out there in growing and understanding the ripple effects of, you know, there's an opposite end to self and community care, right? The direct opposite of that is violent, self-serving and individualistic, and not everybody has your best interest at heart. And so, yeah, so, you know, he was a very calculated, critical thinker by all accounts and very studied. And so no doubt that he took historical analysis and framework into consideration when thinking about how he should move about the world. And so that makes me ask a final question of Dr. Khalid. And, you know, and thinking about what you are carrying with you, I mean, these 7,000 plus, if I at my last count, I believe, of account of your massive historical museum that is a global phenomenon and growing. What are how do you think about the fact that you have this awesome responsibility, culturally, a calling upon your life, to deliver in this way? And like, how does that, if you're thinking about Chadwick, right, and how he knew this calling upon his life and he acted on this calling upon his life and his contributions to our historical framework, and like, how do you see do you see a connection in how you navigate the world, or a divergence, or yeah, I'd love to hear more from you about like your journey to become who you've become.
Thank you, Twana. That's a great question, and I'm going to try to take some time and kind of lay this out, because there's some very, very deep connections. The first thing I want to say is that as I'm listening to everybody, we're all Detroiters, And as I travel around the country, I tell people something very special about Detroit. First and foremost, all of us debunk the stereotypical idea of what a Detroiter is, right? So, I mean, we're not, when people talk about Detroit in either movies or on TV or in the newspapers, we don't fit that stereotype. So I'm honored again to be amongst you and break those stereotypes with people hearing our stories. I've also, for many years since Black Panther came out, I always tell people that growing up in Detroit was like growing up in Wakanda, because everything was Black. We had a very, very unique experience as Detroiters. Having a Black mayor, having a Black city council, having a Black superintendent, having Black school board members, chief of police, police commissioners, going down the line, clergy, entrepreneurs, and business owners. And as you travel, you realize that as a Detroiter, if you grew up, in our era, that we were blessed to be able to see that, and not many people around the country have that experience, right? So I tell people all the time that, growing up in Detroit was like growing up in Wakanda. Another thing is that hip hop culture and growing up in this culture has affected all of us on this talk today, but also impacted Chadwick Boseman too. I saw a great video of him performing one of the Tupac songs, which was dope. He was doing an audition for Broadway, but he did a Tupac piece, which was really, really dope. But one thing about hip hop culture that gives us confidence and gives us really the space to be whoever we want to be. And it gives us that space as long as we come into that space being our authentic self, all right? And as long as we show and prove that's who we are, no matter if we're an MC, no matter if we're a dancer, a DJ, a graffiti artist, as long as we come into that space and make claim to whatever skill set that we have, that's who we are. So for me, having this institution called the Black History 101 Mobile Museum, no one gave me the permission to say that this is a mobile museum. It was actually hip hop culture that gave me that space to make that demand and say that this is a museum. And all I had to do is show up into spaces with artifacts and stories that made it indisputable fact that this is a museum, and people respond as such. You know what I'm saying? So with someone like Chadwick, he goes into spaces and he makes you believe that he's James Brown, or that he's Thurgood Marshall, or that he is T'Challa, all right? And he's pulling upon his experience and growing up in hip hop culture doing that, because that's what it allows us to do. So hip hop allows us also to wear many, many different types of hats. So just giving some background information about myself. I taught in the Detroit Public Schools for 15 years, middle school social studies, prior to doing the Black History 101 Mobile Museum full time. So a lot of the artifacts that you find in the museum today, I actually used in my class as a DPS teacher, mainly because a lot of the resources in the class did not tell our story. So as teachers who might be listening can attest, we always find ourselves having to supplement what's in the classroom based upon the lack of curriculum and resources that we find in our classrooms. So that's one thing. Another thing is that I came across a lot of you all parallel to teaching, working in the hip hop industry as well as working with spoken word artists. So no one, again, gave me permission to be a booking agent. No one gave me permission to be a manager of artists, but it was one thing that I felt that I had a skill set for, and decided that I would put myself out there and try to create a business and be fair dealing with artists. And as you all know, as artists, it's sometimes hard to find people that you can trust in the business, someone that will take take your work to another level. And so I had mentors in the business. One of my first group of clients were the Last Poets. I started working with them in 1994 and still work with them up until today. Also, a very close friend of mine was Proof from D12. I met him in 1997. And when I first met him, I met him down at the Mediterranean Cafe in Greektown that doesn't exist anymore. But that was a spot where after St. Andrews on Friday nights, that's where all the artists would go and hang out. And everybody was up in there, everybody from Slum Village to, Jessica Care Moore, you name it, man. We used to go there and hang out. And I just happened to meet Proof one night in there. I was actually promoting a show for the Last Poets, and Proof was promoting the show for the his group 5 Elements. If you all can see this, this is the original flyer that Proof gave me that night. We exchanged flyers. This is 5 Elements was at the Magic Stick that night. And if you see very closely, the opening act was this young hip hop artist by the name of Eminem. Right? So prior to M, blowing up, this is the space that I'm meeting Proof in 97. And you don't know at that time how history is going to play out. But I mean that flyer, that artifact, for me reminds me of, you just never know who's going to be who, how history is going to play itself out over time. And who would have known, after all these years, we would have, I would have traveled around the world with Proof. He would have got, he got killed in 2006. Chadwick Boseman, he lost a friend of his early on, and he ended up writing a play about that experience of losing somebody who was close to him. So there's a lot of overlapping things that I see in his life and his legacy. Another thing that I see that's overlapping too is the fact that he was a teacher. I remember a few years ago, I went to the Schomburg in Harlem and did an exhibit. And I had the opportunity to walk a group of young folks through the Black History 101 exhibit. We were on display right in the atrium of the Schomburg. And this group really impressed me. They were called the Young Schomburg Scholars Program. And these young folks were brilliant, and they were really into history, really into interpreting artifacts, interpreting Black history and culture. And that group always impressed me. And I stayed in contact for quite some time with the director of education in the program. And actually, she's working on her PhD right now. But I just recently read in my research here that Chadwick was a teacher for that program just a few years before I did my exhibit there. So I was, it was just interesting to see how, those connections are made. And I want to share just a quote from Barack Obama. Chadwick went to the White House when he was just in the middle of doing 42, the Jackie Robinson story. And he spent some time at the White House with some kids who were there. And Barack Obama said that to be young, gifted, and Black, to use the power to give them heroes to look up to, and to do that all with being in pain, that's an amazing task to be having to have to deal with. And it shows you how much of a hero he was. But I gotta talk about the irony, and Tawani, you talked about like the big picture of the work and how this really deals with purpose and really a divine calling as well. And so when Chadwick went there as Jackie Robinson, and I don't have the artifact to show you, but I will share it with you all. Maybe I can send it in the form of a text to people. In the beginning, I talked about Sidney Poitier, Harry Belafonte, and now I'm bringing up Jackie Robinson again. In 1959, these three individuals were part of an organization called the African American Student Foundation. They used their resources and their platform as celebrities to bring African students to America to go to school, all right? And I have an original letter signed by these three men that talk about this fundraising campaign that they were doing. And they mentioned specifically the first 81 students that they brought to America, and this is 1959. When I went and did some research on those 81 students, it blew my mind that one of those 81 students was a man by the name of Barack Obama. All right. So not knowing what your purpose might be, but knowing that what you do in terms of your work and your sacrifice, that you might not know that you're affecting history in a major way, in a phenomenal way. And to come full circle for Chadwick to go to the White House under a Barack Obama presidency as Jackie Robinson, I mean, I don't know how else you can, deny that there's not a God when you have those types of affirmations coming into your life. And I recognize, for myself in doing this work, and Omari can attest to it, that we get these affirmations, doing this work because, some people will say, you can't be a poet and make money. Why are you doing poetry? You can't be an activist and really make change, because how do you make a living being an activist? But it's not about making money or finding a job. Like Tyree said, reflected upon Chadwick's speech at Howard. It's not about making a job, it's about making a difference, right? It's about putting forth an effort, because we know what the obstacles and the oppression looks like for us. So we know that it's not about a job at the end of the day. It's about being of service to your people, right? So I think I'll leave it at that. Chad would recognize the larger work. And if you look at the last several years of his life, knowing that his death perhaps was imminent, that he put his all into it. He gave his everything. And it should be a lesson for all of us who are committed to this work, that we have to do the same thing, that we should be energized and motivated by the legacy that he left. And he's a part of a tradition now as an ancestor of many, many other people who have made those ultimate sacrifices. So I'll leave it at that. But thank you all for this opportunity. Thank you, Tawana, for this opportunity.
Ooh, Shay. Ooh. Okay. So, this is y'all, I'm telling y'all, I live all my emotions out loud. So y'all gonna hear and all the things. Because I'm a proud sister in this moment of these brothers here right now. And so there are 3 questions in our Q&A, and I know I'm gonna start off the second round of the questions with you, but I want to get this first question out to Tyree about a particular that Leona has posed, and then the next 2 questions I'm going to start off with and then go through each of you for the final 2 questions. And so and Tyree, I don't know, you will find out if you know the answer to this question when we ask it. It says, Tyree, if you don't mind, please tell me were you, or are you not familiar with the work of Louise Clayton Jones, 1935 to 2006, international attorney, civil rights leader, founder of National Conference of Black Lawyers, and author of the book Enough is Enough, a collection of articles letters, and speeches of Louis Clayton Jones? Thank you in advance.
Yeah, for sure. I actually think just for the sake of cohesion, Leona asked 2 questions, so I think I'll answer the first one and then do a little bit on the second one too about Howard University and Muhammad Ali. Well, as a proud Howard alum, I'm certainly familiar with Louis Clayton Jones, fellow Howard alum, Yale law graduate, amongst all of his other work. Thinking about Howard University and how we're educated, I think that's one of the things that Howard does very well is make sure we don't forget who came behind us with all of our buildings at the school, either being named after people who taught there or people who graduated from there or people who made really big impacts in DC or Howard University. Every single aspect of my education, whether it was through math class or through swimming, was taught through the lens of my Blackness. So there would have been no way for me to get out of Howard University without hearing about Louis Clayton Jones and every other trailblazer that Howard created. And to the question about Muhammad Ali and the commencement, I want to answer that too and just get off. Chadwick Boseman says in that speech that while he was on campus, Muhammad Ali came in his older years, and he was actually able to encounter him face to face. And Ali looks at him and actually pretends like he's one of his boxing opponents, and they have like a moment together. And it was just, I think Chadwick says that it was one of his early days at Howard University's campus, and he felt like really in tune with the space, and he felt like he was looking at a great, and he was, but like looking at a great, as someone who like also saw him. Eventually Muhammad Ali's security guards like kind of like, all right, get out of here. But like, that he had that moment with him. And then later in the speech, towards the end, he says that he recognized, thinking back on that moment that he had with Ali, that Ali was transferring the spirit of the fighter to him. And the one thing that I think that I take from that experience that he had is it's actually something that Will said, and it's really through the context of disability justice. We all have to recognize when we're done. We have to be able to recognize when we're done, or when we're going to be done, or as Will said, we're going to retire from activism, or however it is you want to frame it. And in doing that, you do what every single person on this panel has done for me, which is take on this role of an educator. In recognizing that you're done, that doesn't mean you just turn off the lights and go to sleep. You go from being an activist in this world in your younger days to eventually being a resident. And when you're a resident in a world that you live in, you would hope that you've left it to hands that are capable of making your stay here comfortable. But to do that, that requires you to recognize that you have to pass on not whatever spirit it is that was brought into you, whatever it is you've galvanized, whatever it is you've cultivated, you have to pass that on. You have to make sure that you've left capable and strong people behind to not only take care of you, but to continue on the legacy of greatness that you created. And that spirit being passed on to Chadwick Boseman, that's definitely the first thing that I recognize, is that, Muhammad Ali didn't box his entire life. He didn't speak on his beliefs. He didn't opt out of drafts his entire life, but what he did do was create moments where we recognize the work that he wanted and the voice that he wanted to bring to the world in front of us. And that I think that his hope and everyone else's hope was that we heard him and we took that up and we took that spirit and we moved forward. So I think that's what those remarks meant to me from that speech.
Ooh, thank you, Tyree. Did anyone else want to comment on either of those two questions? I will start with Omari. And you could, you're on mute.
Yeah, I think Tyree covered those questions about as effectively as they needed to be covered.
And you
I
could
will.
definitely also, okay, go ahead.
I do want to piggyback off of what he said. And first off, I really wanted to thank you, Tawana, for creating this space for us here today to have this discussion as black men with our sister and mother. Um, you know, it's critical that we, a lot of these YouTube videos, you see people talking about sports and hip hop and you got so-called Pan-Africans dissing each other and fighting, and it's like this is the conversation we need to have. So thank you for creating this opportunity in this space for us. I wanted to kind of piggyback off of what Tyree said about the transference of power, right? Like, who did Chadwick transfer the power to? Was it Michael B. Jordan? Was it some student that he ran across at Howard or another campus? Was it some actor whose name we don't know yet that's been in 3 movies that we can't identify just yet, even though we may have seen their face? The transfer of power is very critical.
Your audio went out a little bit. No. Well, go ahead. Do the best you can. And how about you want us to come back to you? Okay. Will, do you want to jump in? And the way that Omari is responding, and Tyree responded does kind of address the last 2 questions, right? Deborah Taylor asked, like, how do you all stay the course and on purpose? Is it a deliberate effort or is it built on impulse? And Tyree talked about a little bit about how Chadwick received the fighter spirit from Muhammad Ali. And that, go ahead, Omari.
Okay, it's telling me my video is disabled, so I'm going to speak.
I'll do that, but go ahead and speak.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I was saying that the transfer of power is something that is traditional in the African spirit and in our African history. And it's something deeper than mentorship, right? Mentorship is one thing, but it's the spiritual piece that sits around and inside of mentorship that's very important. As we progress, we realize that our friends, we can transfer that energy back and forth to each other. Activists transfer that energy, fighting spirit, back and forth among each other, right? And activists, as Tyree said, sometimes you need to sit down and retire and relax and know that you transferred enough of that into others so that they can carry on. I know I keep trying to get out and people keep bringing me back in. I'm with Michigan Liberation right now, managing the team, working on, the criminal justice system reform. And it comes back to what I said in the very beginning. When you do what you love, you're not working. But it's very critical that we pace ourselves and observe self-care, because many times we become toxic to ourselves too much because we're not taking a moment out to walk on the beach in a state that we've never been to, because we're not climbing a mountain to stand next to a waterfall. So it's very critical that while we give each other praise and acknowledgement for the work we're doing, we have to also say, go sit your ass down, or go to the beach, or go hang out with your family. I'll take care of this today, or somebody else will take care of it. So there were people taking care of Chadwick Boseman towards the end of his life. And I think that probably made his life even more valuable when he looked around and saw that people loved him and that he was connected. And I think that that's something that we all should invest in each other as we move forward, because a lot of times us folks in activism, we look around and sometimes we really don't have many people around us outside of the activities and the organizing and so on and so forth. So my message to everyone is, in honor of Chadwick, observe and practice self-care. Study and see what self-care can look like. Go deeper in your self-care.
Ashe, thank you, O. And it really does make me think a lot about what Will said as well, is about, learn how to care for yourself and then figure out how the collective can then care for each other. And that's tremendous. And I think not only has the pandemic taught us that, but yeah, I'm noticing all across the world that people have taken that as a message from how Chadwick intentionally cultivated the circle of care for himself. And the people who have had to reflect after judging that circle of care that he created for himself. And so there's been tremendous transformation amongst.
And Tawana, I lost my sister, Lanika Barksdale. We called her Nikki. March 23rd to COVID-19. And there's one thing I have to say is, when I went blind and when I suffered my burn, I really thought there wasn't too many people in my corner. But when my sister passed, I'm telling you, it seems like the world that I personally know was all there, all hands on deck. The care came out of nowhere. So it's there. We might not always see it, but we have to remember, even when we don't feel like it's there, it is there.
Ashe. Khalid, do you want to chime in on how you all stay on course and on purpose? And is it deliberate? Is it built in impulse? How have you experienced continuing in this calling upon your life?
Well, I think COVID has brought a lot of this to the forefront, and as everybody mentioned, self-care is a huge thing. And being at home after being on the road a whole lot and having just to sit for a while and reflect, it's a very good thing. I've taken this time since I think I came back home in mid-March. And just, it was a blessing that if anything could be a blessing about COVID, one of the things that it coincided with Ramadan this year. So being at home and being able to take 30 days and just fast and just going to myself spiritually was a huge thing. And to be at home and as a Muslim to be able to make prayers 5 times a day on time and wake up, reading the Quran and just, I live on the west side of the state now, so being able to access, the rivers and lakes and woods out here, self-care is a huge thing for me. And also doing photography. I don't know if you all seen some of my posts over the past few months of just taking pictures of landscapes and just being more reflective on the smaller things in life and the beauty that surrounds us, and those types of things. And a lot of us don't have an opportunity to do those types of things, but to want to going up to Idlewild is a huge thing for folks, right? So to be able to go up there and be amongst people who have a kindred spirit, and just to be able to reflect and re-energize each other. And that's one thing that I got the last time I was up there with you all, just being amongst my peers and just re-energizing and affirming each other, right, on what this work means to all of us was a huge thing. So we have to, stay in touch. We have to reflect. We have to, look at the ultimate reality, because the one thing about Chadwick's life is that, we understand that life is short. You know what I'm saying? We don't know when the end is going to come. So it's during these times that we remember, like, what the ultimate reality is. So, and so to stay in contact with each other, to, let folks know that that they're loved and that they're wanted, that they're appreciated, is something that's really, really important that we need to do. So that's it.
Ashe, thank you for that. And I'm glad you talked about and first giving, honor and reverence to Omari's sister as one of our newly gained ancestors as well. And I had the privilege to drive through the Belle Isle memorial that honored 1,500 of Detroiters who lost their lives to COVID-19. 900 of those photos were present of the 1,500. I did stop by and pay homage to old sister, whom I did not know personally, but just paid homage to the ancestral gains that we have experienced through this traumatic time, and thinking about how you don't necessarily, it makes me think a lot about how the narrative around even COVID-19 was basically this assessment that these were the sacrifices, because these were people who came into this world flawed, essentially. And, it was a kind of a dominant narrative that, went around and dictated some very racist policies and behaviors globally, that put a perspective on Blackness as being like, this inferior, predisposed existence that is the reason why we're being taken out by this virus. We know that, the pandemic of racism is one that has been pre-existing for a very long time. And some of us are newly being exposed to that pandemic and having to figure out how to struggle through both at the same time. Many of us, most of us. And so yeah, I love Dr. Khalid, how you talked about not being promised and making sure that we're checking in and thinking about not only our self-care, but who is that circle that we're keeping in touch with. And I have had the honor of not always being directly connected to you all on a consistent basis, but knowing that when I call a point, there is no doubt in my heart and mind that if I picked up a phone for any of you and said, sent out the honeycomb signal, that you wouldn't be in a circle of care and vice versa. And that's important. And having a circle of care does not mean that you talk to people every day. It means that you trust them with your livelihood, with your secrets, with your stories, with your legacy, with your work, with your contributions, and you are a core of that in the part of the tiny village that I have been fortunate to cultivate over the last decade or more. And I will tell y'all one more funny thing before I go into the final thoughts for each of you, and that is I dragged Tyree in my belly to Ferris in the 95, 96 time frame of being up on that campus while I was pregnant and getting in trouble every time I got back on the road. But you just never know those connections of being in spaces where legacy has been cultivated, where energy has been placed, and where you'll end up 24 years later on a panel with someone who was in your womb in a space where you all were creating history. And so,
And I was at Ferris then.
I know. And so, and I didn't even know at the time, but we learned as when I was bringing Tyree onto the stage as a young poet in his, 12, 13 years old, that, he was in my womb probably hearing Omari do poetry. So, you just never know. Our ancestors are powerful, and they transfer memory, they transfer energy, they transfer the fight. And we just have to tune in, and cultivate those things that we've been fortunate to be passed and connected to. And I see this as a continuation of that ancestral legacy of passing. And I won't even say passing torch, because I believe in in kind of like the relay, right? And where it's a connection, it's a consistent connection of a cultivated legacy of protracted struggle and resistance and vision, that doesn't stop at the next hand that you give it to. That's not the end of the race, right? It's a continuation. And so I want to ask you all a final just to give, your final, not final, your message and words for continuation for those folks whose ears are perked into this conversation right now, who may be on Facebook Live, who may be watching someone's watch party, who may be on this Zoom recording, or who might watch this later, who aren't watching it right now, and of all generations, of all racial demographics, because it won't just be us looking at this video. What do you have? What is it that you want to offer into this moment? And I'm thinking about Asada, who is sitting behind me on my bookshelf, and as someone who is an enduring inspiration for me, along with you all. What is this? What's something, that a seed that you want to pass on, that you hope that someone picks up from you, and runs with it? Or what do you want to cultivate in the next iteration of this work? And so I'm gonna this time I'm gonna start with Will, and then move to Dr. Khalid, then Omari, and close out with Tyree.
Ashe. Both of my parents were from the South, and both of them were of the age and was born in such a way in which they were at least teenagers, if not young adults, before this whole thing called segregation or legalized apartheid or whatever you want to call it, before that ended. So they lived, some years under those conditions. And so shout out to everybody in the South. You know what I'm saying? Like, before my people, we only been up here in the North 40, 50 years. You know what I'm saying? We got hundreds of years in the South. So, you know what I'm saying? Shout out to the South. But this message that as a teenager, I was wrestling with this question of, there's a war against my people. Did it ever end? Is this war over? And what's my role? You know what I'm saying? We ain't trying to lose this war. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of energy was passed that I'm in the, you know what I'm saying? It's not just inequality, but I'm in a war. You know what I mean? And yeah, you got, in the army, you got 20-year-olds, you know what I'm saying? But the generals got a few decades under them. You know what I'm saying? So don't count out the old folks, you know what I'm saying? And so I'm just trying to be worthy, you know what I'm saying? I'm just trying to be worthy, and I'm just trying to have my role that's appropriate for this phase of my life. And I think that with Chadwick Boseman, I'm usually very much into independent art, underground art, fuck the celebrities, all that type of stuff, but I really appreciate his integrity in dealing with Hollywood, his integrity in dealing with these institutions. And that was very enlivening and enlightening, that I've been learning these last few weeks. And so wherever your role, there's a role you could play in the war, inside, outside, old, young, institutional, grassroots, but you just kind of got to step up to that role and do it for real. You know what I'm saying? And so, I'm not trying to argue and say his path was wrong or his path was right or whatever, but it's just, I value the way he played his role and the way he did his thing. You know what I'm saying? The way he did his thing in these you know what I'm saying? Hollywood ain't trying to empower Africans. Hollywood ain't trying to have our liberation. They just trying to make money. And so he, wherever you do, if you do it with that integrity and you link up, there's a way you could do it. You know what I'm saying? There's a way you could do it. And eventually one day we're gonna create whole new systems, and hopefully we create our own entertainment system. It'll be the freshest shit ever. But until then, you know what I'm saying? We're gonna be in these colonized spaces. We're gonna be in these, institutions that we don't have full control over. But you can still do your thing. You know what I'm saying? You can still, and if you outside the institutions, you can still do your thing. And so that's kind of my closing statement.
Ashe, thank you. Dr. Khalid?
Yeah. So before I make my final statements, I just want to thank everybody again. I want to thank you again, Tawana, for being who you are. I'm so happy to know you. So proud of all the work you're doing, and it's just really amazing to see your growth over the years. And I remember when I first met you, just starting off on the poetry scene and just not knowing, like, all right, you starting off as a poet and then you become an activist and then you just grow into just like who you are today. It's just amazing to see. So I'm very, very proud of you and the work that you're doing. And I'm honored to even to have been invited on this platform with you all. So thank you. But for me, I think of just legacy, just plain and simple legacy, and what that means. And agreeing with Will, it's also about looking at Hollywood and critiquing Hollywood spaces. Chadwick made a comment about the gods of Egypt, and he critiqued it, and he said, although he was a part of it, but he's still very critical of it. And he said people don't make $140 million movies showing Black and brown people, and that was just a critique of his. But think about it, just a couple years later, Black Panther makes $200 million plus. You know what I'm saying? So, that's going back to hip hop culture and the power of that. You level up, right? So that's a part of the culture. And thinking about legacy too, he just left a amazing body of work and an example, and we've heard over and over again the language of his character of integrity. You know what I'm saying? Like he's somebody who just left something that we all could be proud of as Black people. You know what I'm saying? And usually in Hollywood, you always have people who have some type of grimy stories associated with him and that type of thing. And you don't get that from Chadwick. You just get stories of just Black excellence, and you hear that he was a very faithful person too. He was a very spiritual person too. He understood what his platform meant to other people. He was a selfless person. He recognized what his talent was, and he understood that so much so that there are certain roles that he wouldn't take that was stereotypical of what Hollywood imagined for him. So he kind of put himself out there to let people know that there's certain things that he's not going to do. And he played his role very well up into the end, with integrity, with humility, with faith. And I'm just very impressed by the brother. And I'll end it like that. But thank you all again.
Ashe, thank you so much. Omari?
Yeah, so when I think about connections, when I think about moving through time, I think about my mother and father, born July 26th and July 31st in 1950, born just a few short days apart, so close in time that they were in the hospital at the same time, because back in the day, you didn't get released. A mother and baby didn't get released in 24 hours or 48 hours. And it was almost as if they came together just to make me, because they didn't stay together after that, right? So, and I look at our family lineages, my father's family being from Alabama, both parents from Alabama, families of people who were enslaved not long before that. And on my grandmother's side, my cousin, my third cousin being the historic racist governor of Alabama, George Wallace. And then I moved forward up the geographic plane to Canada, where my family was taken across to Canada by way of a couple of historic abolitionists and Harriet Tubman and John Brown at different points. And then working with Khalid, meeting Khalid in college, and his family being from Dresden, and my great-grandfather being from Dresden, Ontario, which is where Uncle Tom's Cabin is, for the late, great Josiah Henson. So when I think about all of these connections, right, I think about the web of time and the web of people and how we are all influenced by one another, even if we don't realize it or not, right? We're always told that you can be anything you want to be, but what we're not told often enough is you need to do what you need to be, right? You need to do what you need to do. This means that you need to make sure that you stand for something. And to me, when I look at Chadwick Boseman, I see somebody who stood for something. You don't need to read stories about roles that he didn't accept. All you had to do was look at the roles that he actually had. He made Hollywood come to him. And this is what our children have the power to do, is to make everybody come to us in a respectful way, in the way we want them to come to us. We just have to make demands and stick to them in a unified fashion. So when I think about Dr. Chadwick Boseman, and I'll end it with this. For anybody who understands the franchise that Marvel created, he is our Black Infinity Stone.
Ashe. Woo! Ashe on that one. And Omari, you and George Wallace and them, that's gonna be a whole nother panel. We need a whole
Yeah, we need to have that discussion.
We need a whole. I'm glad you made it to John Brown after that. I'm just,
Yeah.
But wow, that's deep. Woo.
Yeah, my one of my great whatever grandmothers, actually John Brown had to stop at, I think it was Second Baptist Church at the time, for her to give birth.
Wow.
And then she carried the baby over a couple of days later. Yeah.
You know what? Well, look, y'all look out for the panel dialogue discussion with Omari on this sordid legacy. But
Speaking of legacy,
so much
love to legacy forever.
Ashe.
Shantae legacy. Yes.
Ashe. Legacy. Yeah. Anyway, I tell her mom all the time that Legacy Leonard is constantly with me, because I know that if she was here on this side of things, I know she's here as an ancestor and covering, but if she was here on this side of things, she would be in so much stuff with me right now. It's not even funny. But anyhow,
her and Charity right there.
Ashe. Yep. You already know. Wage love. And so I want to finally, before I give Tyree the final word, I want to give this comment from Mama Gwen Winston, who is a legacy elder and somebody that I look up to as well. And she says, your self-care visions are elevating, and to let you know that I will be adapting your words within my beingness. Transference of power and energy in the spirit that sits in and around us. Peace. So I want y'all to take that seed that has been planted in you all from Mama Gwen Winston.
I love Gwen Winston. I love her.
Ashe, me too. Cultivate and harvest that. And Tyree, I'm going to close us out on your final comments.
Yeah, I definitely want to say I'm really thankful to be in this discussion. Not only is it important, it's enriching. It's a debrief of how I think we all felt over the past couple of weeks with a lot of the passing, not only Chadwick Boseman, but through COVID-19 and a lot of what we've all either lost or given up in this time right now. And I think in that spirit, one thing that Chadwick Boseman makes me think about is how we talk about people who pass on, who transition. You know, we say that Chadwick Boseman, you know, lost his life at, you know, or lost his life because of, but, you know, Chadwick Boseman didn't lose his life. You know, we did. And like, we lost Chadwick Boseman's life. And I think in the spiritual sense of what humanity feels like, it's not like a glass of water where you scoop out a little bit and then the water converges to fill that space left. Like there's a hole there now, you know, and I've only felt like this a few times in my life when people pass on. And, you know, you brought up Charity Hicks. That was one of the most major times where I felt like, you know, we lost her life. But what we know about Charity and how we felt when she transitioned, and what we know about Chadwick Boseman now that he's gone, and Congressman Lewis, is that those gaps require us to all do a little bit more collectively to fill. You know, if we all do everything that we did while those people were alive, then now their loss leaves us whole, you know, and everything is a little less rich. You know, life is a little less rich with the loss of these great contributors to society and to humanity. So, you know, with Chadwick passing, you know, and us losing his life, I feel like we have a responsibility, you know, and then he left us with a responsibility where whether we take that on as individuals to try to fill whatever shoes he left behind and own that legacy of dignity and integrity, or, you know, own the legacy of being in spaces and speaking only to what you know is true or to who you are. Or where we each as individuals take on just a little bit more to collectively fill that space and be that water that hopefully eventually can converge to create some type of unity and some type of fullness that we had before they passed on, you know? And I think that's what I feel with Chadwick being gone and with Charity being gone, now that we've invoked her name, is that we just all have to do a little bit more. You know, we all have to do a little bit more than we did the day before they were gone. And, you know, hopefully that helps honor them, you know, and hopefully like we can all collectively be at least a little bit, at least half, you know, of what they were. And go back to that spirit of teaching and educating. So when it's time for us to, you know, as Omari said, you know, when it's time for us to sit down, or it's time for us to get on the beach, you know, or when society eventually loses our life, you know, that spirit of taking up, or I guess in sports, they would say next man up, that spirit, you know, it continues.
Ashe. Give thanks, so much gratitude for each of you. The honor, trust me, is mine, and spending my afternoon with you and your brilliance and your empathy and integrity and compassion for humanity and history and legacy and Africans all over the diaspora. I'm truly, truly grateful. You have given great contribution. If it be God's will that, you know, today be your last day, do know that you have left a lot for folks to harvest and share and cultivate. And I'll finally say this: I'm reminded of this comment that my son said to me one day when he was at Howard. And he called me, and I don't know if he remembers this, but he said, I was sitting in the library with my headphones on listening to Tupac. And I just had this moment where I thought to myself, I bet you back in 1996, there was a kid sitting in the same seat with their headphones on listening to Tupac. And that was just like a powerful connection that I know he felt, but that I really felt, because I was thinking like how, when you talk about the impact of a person and what they bring to these elements of art, and these other hip hop and all the things that hip hop is to us, to have my son, you know, 20 years later, having headphones on in the same institution, knowing that there was a kid 20 years prior with headphones on listening to that same person who had created such an impact on our culture. And so I know that 20 years now, when computers are flying or whatever's going to happen, or, you know, folks are on Mars, you know, unfortunately colonizing that space, but somebody's going to be finding a pod of this discussion and listening and thinking about how we've now created the futuristic titanium Wakanda that Chadwick portrayed. And they'll talk to their parent, you know, many decades from now and recount this discussion. And so, you know, I always be thinking about those generations ahead and what we put into the universe, and what our responsibilities are, as Tyree said, and hoping that a part of those responsibilities to do a little more also means that it's our collective care. And so thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. So grateful for you. And thank you again.
I say I'm proud of you and thank you.
Ashe, I'm proud of y'all too. Thank you so much.
So much.
Hey, peace.
Peace.
Proud of you, Tyree. Keep going, man. Keep going. You
Sure.
got this.
Yeah, boy.
That's right. Do affirmations real quick. As y'all in, let's just shout them out. Let's just shout them out. Thank you. I love y'all. And yes, everybody.
Love you too, sis. I love all y'all.
No doubt. Keep it going, Tyree.
Absolutely. I love y'all. You know, I am where I am because of y'all. So thank you.
And Tyree, reach out to me if you ever need me.
For sure.
I'm gonna send you my. I'm gonna have your mom send you my number.
I'm gonna be on her for that.
All right. Peace, y'all.
Peace.